What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Sword Hero, an upcoming title that, while available in a relatively small demo right now, aims to be something truly promising, which is an open-world interactive RPG. And honestly, just after playing this for a few minutes, you'll probably immediately get the idea that this is going to be something special, which is why I wanted to cover it with you. So, kind of wrapping up the last of the things I wanted to look at as part of the Steam Next Fest going on was this demo some people had suggested to me. And yet, while the demo itself is pretty good, it's really just a small piece of the puzzle here because Sword Hero is aiming to be, as mentioned, a larger open-world RPG with things like dynamic systems, crime, reputation, factions you can join, NPC schedules, all that stuff. However, right now, this demo is basically just a test for the combat and stuff, which honestly feels great, and we'll get to that. And that is because they are still fairly early in development here, with both a Kickstarter and an alpha planned in the next couple of months, basically before the year is out. And so with this video, I want to do a couple things, talk about what's actually available in the demo and my thoughts on that, but then also what they're planning for the full game to be, because I am genuinely very intrigued by this. But first, just for the sake of making it easy, let's talk about what the demo is. As mentioned, it is a combat test primarily, so whereas the full game will allow you to make a character and customize them, for the sake of this particular demo, you pick one of 3 pre-generated characters that kind of fall into a general play style, which is your standard sort of warrior, rogue, mage types. You find yourself in an arena, you can fight a bunch of battles and get to grips with the game's directional limb-based combat system, alongside a handful of other systems like the sort of crime system that you can engage with the vendor that is available, but also you can do things like check out the lockpicking, things like that. So there are a couple of other activities outside of the combat itself. And you can also use your winnings from the arena to do things like upgrade your equipment and kind of get a basic idea of how some of that stuff is going to feel. But as the star of the show, the combat is really the focus here. And I was happy to see that not just the initial back and forth with enemies feels great, but also the fact that they've even roped in the environment into it. There being spike walls you could potentially kick enemies in, depending on if you have the ability or not. The ability to use a few different ranged attacks, be that magic or a bow and the like, but it really all first starts with the directional limb-based stuff. So you can target individual limbs if you don't want to just swing a little more wildly, and that's important because when you do enough damage to a body part, it becomes wounded and starts to bleed, both you and the enemy, which will eventually lead to your death if you don't get it bandaged up. And you can potentially even completely remove limbs. Now, in the full game, this will apparently lead to the option of getting prosthetics, and you can even see a couple of those in the demo itself. Melee is pretty straightforward in the sense that you can, of course, attack, block, parry, things like that. Parrying is kind of a big deal because it allows you to build up your psi energy, which then is your ability to actually use things like your skills or abilities. For melee characters, this was just a basic kick, which would obviously knock enemies back and potentially throw them into a spike wall or something. Whereas for the sort of mage character, they can equip runes, which allow them to shoot their basic magic, but when they build up psi, which seems to just build naturally as opposed to being something they had to work up to with the melee characters, they could unleash this big sort of area attack on the enemies within, of course, this given little circle. So there's some back and forth there between the individual play styles. Really though, just the weightiness of it, the movement, how you could attack individual body parts and how that played into, of course, your approach to the combat. And obviously there's things like an armor system, a poise system, and honestly just a great feeling combat system for an RPG, which is itself not always a super common thing outside of just stuff like Souls-likes as an example. So already off to a good start, but let's actually talk about what the rest of the game, when it is supposed to fully be available as the RPG it is hoping to be. They are planning on, of course, adding dynamic systems, as mentioned, NPC routines, crime, factions, a day-night cycle, the ability to replace lost limbs with things like prosthetics. They even show off some bladed weapons and stuff that you could potentially replace your arms with over on their Steam page. They actually also mention over there that it will be possible to collect items off of cut off body parts of, I presume, creatures and the like, but I guess we'll see. There's apparently going to be a housing system that will let you purchase both businesses and houses. Some visual character progression in the sense that your stats should change how your character looks outside of just like the prosthetic stuff. Enemies will not be scaling with you, meaning that you will just be eventually able to dominate stuff, as opposed to level scaling, things like that. You will be able to join one of 3 factions, and that seems to be the core of the experience they're trying to build. But as I also mentioned, they are planning a Kickstarter. I do not endorse Kickstarters personally, but of note here, I suppose, given the full nature of the story. And it's my understanding they're planning on using that Kickstarter to potentially expand out even further into some other systems they would like to make happen. But obviously I don't know exactly what those are at the moment. Now, just as some general thoughts, obviously some of this is still up in the air and is dependent, again, on a successful Kickstarter, but just what I've played of this demo was really impressive. The combat itself feels awesome, and I think if they can take the other systems at play and manage to mesh those and match up with the combat really well, you might have an extremely compelling RPG on your hands when this thing releases, which is why I wanted to cover it. Now, while I didn't see it mentioned anywhere, given that they have a crime system, I would personally love to see a stealth system at play here, both to facilitate some of that crime, but also as an intro into combat. But given how impressive the melee combat is, it's not the kind of game I would necessarily want to play a stealth archer in. And then of course there's whatever the actual story winds up being, which here is a little vague. I'm sure you've gotten the sense of it over the course of some of the things I've mentioned here, but they are obviously inspired by the Gothic series, even if the game itself is not necessarily an exact imitation. But we do know you'll be traveling around the island of Wes, as it's called, fighting off all the various dangers of the wilderness and of course the people who want to kill you. But I mention some of that because I think if you combine all of these potential systems and everything at play with a really compelling story, then you will have a fantastic game on your hands, which naturally means there is a ton of potential here. Though I would also be curious to see more of this magic system, and they also talk a little bit on the Steam page about having fights with much larger creatures. And given the sort of combat system here, I'd be very curious to see how that would wind up working. So it's not like I don't have some questions, but I genuinely can't really remember the last time a demo for a game surprised me this much. This is something really cool. I definitely plan on keeping up with it. I hope it manages to get made, and while I don't expect it to be out anytime soon, I will for sure be keeping an eye on it because this was, again, very cool. But that is pretty much all I've got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed the demo. You should definitely check it out for yourself. I'm pretty sure it will be up even after the Steam Fest is over, but I can't be entirely sure about that. Though it is my understanding there is a plan in place for there to be an alpha available for the people who actually do back it on Kickstarter once that gets going, so there should be more of this beyond a combat test available not so far off in the future, and I may well cover that when it rolls around, but for today, that is pretty much going to do it. So again, hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think about this one down in the comments section below, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.